The Lanterns of Karakoy, Episode 1. The ferry was quiet, a gentle hum of the engine the only sound breaking the evening's calm. The sky was a faded blue-gray with tinges of soft gold lingering near the horizon, but the sun, an orange smudge of light, hung just above the sea, scattering its fading warmth across the water. The city, so familiar from the shore, looked different now, its outlines blurred by the mist that began to creep in from the sea. The traveler, seated on the deck, leaned against the cold, smooth railing, feeling the faint touch of metal against their skin, the faint taste of salt on the breeze. The scent of the sea was thick in the air, almost sweet, and it mingled with the scent of spices carried by the wind, cumin, saffron, cinnamon, and the delicate perfume of jasmine from somewhere far off. There was something exotic in the mixture, rich with the memories of markets long past. The traveler breathed in deeply, the fresh salt tinged with the faintest edge of diesel from the ferry's engine, now less noticeable but still present. The engine's pulse, steady and rhythmic, almost seemed to fade as they focused on the sounds around them, seagulls calling overhead, their wings cutting through the air with a gentle swoosh. The occasional splash of water against the side of the ferry felt like a soft tap, a reminder of the boundary between the stillness of the land and the fluidity of the sea. The ferry swayed gently as it cut through the Bosphorus Strait, the rhythmic motion lulling them into a quiet, sleepy reverie. The sun was dipping lower now, casting long shadows across the water, turning it into a shimmering mass of molten copper. The traveler couldn't help but watch as the last rays of sunlight glittered on the water, rippling like 1,000 tiny golden threads, pulling their gaze toward the distant shores of the Asian side. The glow of the setting sun softened everything it touched, the concrete buildings on the European side, the jagged outline of minarets, the sloping roofs of old houses, all bathed in the amber warmth of late afternoon. The air felt cooler now, the warmth of the sun slowly fading, and the traveler felt a gentle shiver run down their spine, as though the city itself were bidding farewell to the day. There was something almost melancholic in the way the last light of the sun disappeared into the horizon, like a final whisper before the night. The shifting colors in the sky, burnished golds and pale blues, seemed to fill the traveler with a quiet yearning. For a moment, they considered the vastness of the sea, the mystery of the land they were leaving behind, and the unknowns that lay ahead. The ferry's motion seemed almost hypnotic now, the steady rhythm of the waves beneath it matching the gentle pulse of the traveler's heartbeat. They watched as the golden light faded into twilight and the air grew even cooler. The mist, too, was beginning to gather, thin tendrils of fog curling up from the water like ghostly fingers, blurring the city beyond. It made everything seem softer, more ethereal. As the ferry cut through the mist, the traveler could just make out the distant silhouette of the Asian shore, a dark smudge against the darkening sky. It was then that the lanterns appeared. At first, they were only dots in the distance, floating, shimmering specks that looked almost like fireflies, their soft glow casting a faint light on the mist that shrouded the waters. But as the boat moved closer to the Asian shore, they began to take shape. Paper lanterns, their delicate rounded bodies swaying in the night breeze. Some were small, almost like children's toys, while others were larger, glowing softly as though they carried the warmth of 100 forgotten stories within them. The light from the lanterns seemed to fill the space around the ferry, spilling across the water, stretching out in long, languid swaths. The soft amber glow illuminated the mist, transforming it into something magical, almost like the entire world had turned into a dream. The traveler could feel the light beckoning, pulling them deeper into the night. The lanterns were strung between wooden posts, draped across both the ferry piers on the European and Asian sides, their strings twinkling in the growing darkness. They seemed to glide in the air as the ferry passed them, caught in the breeze that carried the salty scent of the sea. With each passing lantern, the traveler noticed something else, something faint and otherworldly. The soft chime of a distant bell, barely audible, as if each lantern rang its secret bell, a sound that was just beyond the reach of memory. The sound lingered, a soft murmur that seemed to vibrate in the very air itself, like an echo from another world. The traveler's pulse quickened, though they could not explain why. They felt as though they were being drawn into something greater than themselves, something ancient and timeless. It was a subtle shift, an unease that stirred beneath the peace, like the promise of an adventure just beginning to unfold. The world around them had softened, as though the ferry, the city, and the sea were all part of a dream. The city, once bustling and full of noise, now seemed distant, muffled by the space between Europe and Asia. Here on the water, with the ferry's wake cutting through the quiet sea, everything seemed to slow. The traveler's heartbeat synced with the rhythm of the waves, steady and soft. The air grew cooler as they moved further from the European side, and the scent of the sea deepened, richer now, more familiar. The sea seemed endless, stretching out in all directions, and the sky above was darkening faster than they had realized. The twilight hung heavy in the air, thick with possibility. As the ferry slowed, a fine mist began to rise from the surface of the water, curling up like soft fingers reaching for the boat. The air had turned crisp, and the traveler pulled their jacket tighter around themselves. The lanterns, now closer, seemed to shimmer with new intensity, their soft glow casting a warm light on the mist that surrounded the ferry. The mist seemed to dance in the glow, swirling around the edges of the boat, and for a moment, it felt as though the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. The ferry's bell rang once, its sound hollow and deep, reverberating through the mist, the water, and the air itself. A soft shiver ran down the traveler's spine, the bell's tone wrapping itself around their senses. The light from the lanterns below flickered, casting momentary shadows across the water, stretching the quiet landscape in strange directions. It was as though the water itself was reflecting the light, forming shapes, hints of images just out of reach, familiar yet unsettling in their unfamiliarity. The traveler felt something stir in the quiet, a connection to this place, an understanding that these lanterns, glowing softly in the growing dusk, were not merely decorative. They were guides, keeping the darkness at bay. The traveler gazed at them for a long time, feeling an odd sense of peace wash over them, as though the lanterns held more than just light. Each flicker seemed to tell a story, each soft glow an invitation to look deeper, to follow. The traveler's eyes traced the lantern's delicate curves, watching as their soft light reflected on the water, creating ripples of gold and amber that expanded outwards. It was then that the stillness of the moment deepened, and for the first time, the traveler felt as though they were suspended between two worlds, one fading, the other emerging. The ferry's engine grew softer as they neared the Asian shore, and the faint murmur of the city reached their ears, the distant clink of metal, the murmur of voices. The fog, which had swallowed the water, was now thinning, revealing the silhouette of the Karaköy district on the horizon. The lights on the shore flickered, reflecting off the water. But it was the lanterns that held the travelers' attention. They seemed to grow larger, their light more intense, casting a soft glow over everything they touched. The ferry's motion slowed, the engine now a distant whisper, and the traveler rose from the deck, their legs a little stiff from the long journey. The mist was beginning to clear, and the warmth of the air on the Asian side was noticeable. A soft warmth that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the city. The cobblestone streets of Karaköy were now visible, their ancient stones glistening beneath the amber glow of the lanterns. The travelers' feet touched the dock with a soft thud, and they stood for a moment, taking in the scene before them, the lanterns swaying in the breeze, their soft light casting shadows on the walls of the buildings, the distant sounds of the city calling them forward. For a brief moment, the traveler felt as though they had crossed not just a physical boundary, but a boundary between worlds, from the known to the unknown, from one reality into another. The air smelled richer here, sweet with the fragrance of jasmine and spices, tinged with something older, something more secret. The traveler's heart quickened as they took their first step onto the cobblestones, the cool, rough surface grounding them as they looked up at the lanterns overhead. They seemed to glow brighter now, the light spilling across the dock and into the streets, guiding the traveler forward into the unknown. The cobblestones beneath the traveler's feet felt worn but solid, polished by centuries of footsteps. Each step seemed to echo gently in the quiet evening air, a soft percussion accompanying the distant murmurs of the city. The traveler paused, glancing back at the ferry as it pulled away from the dock, its silhouette growing smaller against the darkening horizon. The European shore was now just a collection of twinkling lights, like scattered stars fallen to earth, partially obscured by the thickening mist that rolled across the water. Turning back to face Karaköy, the traveler noticed how the lanterns seemed to form a pathway leading away from the dock and into the maze of narrow streets. The lanterns here were different from those at the pier. Older, their paper more weathered, painted with symbols that the traveler couldn't quite decipher. The light they cast was warmer, more golden, seeming to pulse with each gentle sway in the evening breeze. The traveler followed this illuminated path, drawn forward by curiosity and something they couldn't name, a feeling like recognition, though they had never been here before. The sounds of the city grew clearer as they ventured deeper into the winding streets, the gentle clatter of dishes from a nearby cafe, the soft murmur of conversation in a language they only half understood, the occasional burst of laughter that seemed to hang in the air like music. The buildings on either side of the narrow street rose up, their facades a patchwork of old and new ancient stone foundations supporting newer structures, modern windows set into crumbling walls. Time seemed to layer upon itself here, centuries compressed into a single moment. Balconies jutted out overhead, some adorned with potted plants whose leaves rustled in the breeze, others draped with drying laundry that fluttered like flags in the gentle wind. The scent of the sea gradually mingled with other aromas, The rich, inviting smell of roasting coffee beans, the spicy warmth of grilled meats, and the sweet perfume of cardamom and rosewater. The traveler's stomach gave a gentle rumble, a reminder that they hadn't eaten since boarding the ferry. The thought of food pulled them forward, through a small square where several paths converged. In the center of the square stood an ancient fountain, its stone basin worn smooth by time and water. Though no water flowed from it now, lanterns had been placed around its circumference, their light reflecting off the polished stone. The traveler paused, noticing how the shadows seemed to move across the fountain's surface, creating patterns that almost resembled words or symbols, though they shifted too quickly to be read. A soft sound caught the traveler's attention, the gentle plucking of a stringed instrument, perhaps a saz or oud, coming from somewhere nearby. The melody was haunting, a minor key progression that seemed both melancholy and hopeful, echoing off the stone walls of the buildings surrounding the square. The traveler turned, trying to locate the source of the music, and noticed a small cafe tucked into a corner of the square, its entrance framed by climbing jasmine, whose white flowers glowed faintly in the lantern light. The cafe's windows were steamed from within, suggesting warmth and comfort. Through the glass, the traveler could make out the silhouettes of people gathered around tables, some engaged in animated conversation, others sitting in companionable silence. The door was open, spilling a rectangle of golden light onto the cobblestones. Without consciously deciding to do so, the traveler found themselves moving toward this light, drawn by the promise of warmth, food, and perhaps company. The cafe was called Fener, according to the weathered wooden sign hanging above the door, the Turkish word for lantern, the traveler recalled from their guidebook. It seemed fitting, given the glowing paper lanterns that hung both outside and within. As they stepped through the doorway, the traveler was enveloped in warmth, and the rich aroma of Turkish coffee, strong and slightly bitter, mingled with the sweet scent of baked goods. The interior was small but cozy, with perhaps a dozen tables arranged around a central hearth where a small fire crackled softly. The walls were lined with bookshelves, crowded with volumes of various sizes and apparent ages. Some looked ancient, their leather bindings cracked and worn, while others seemed newer, their spines still bright with color. The ceiling was low, crossed with dark wooden beams from which more lanterns hung, casting a warm, flickering light over everything. The traveler hesitated just inside the doorway, suddenly aware of being a stranger in this intimate space. The conversation didn't stop, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a moment of collective awareness as the patrons noticed the newcomer. Then, as quickly as it had come, the moment passed, and the level of conversation returned to its previous volume. An elderly man approached, his face creased with lines that deepened when he smiled. His eyes, dark and keen, seemed to assess the traveler with a single glance.
"Good evening,"
the man said. The traveler sensed a welcome in his gaze, along with curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. He gestured to a small table near one of the windows, offering a view of the square outside, where the lanterns continued to sway in the evening breeze, their light reflecting off the cobblestones, still damp from an earlier rain. The wood of the chair was smooth beneath the traveler's fingers, worn by years of use. The elderly man, who seemed to be the owner of the cafe, returned moments later with a small glass of amber tea, steam rising from its surface and carrying the fragrant aroma of black tea. The menu lay on the table, its pages worn at the edges from frequent handling. The traveler pointed to an item at random, and the old man nodded in approval before moving away to prepare the order. The travelers sipped the tea, its warmth spreading through them. The cafe felt increasingly comfortable, as though they had been there many times before. The conversations around them, though in a language they didn't understand, had a soothing quality, rising and falling like waves against the shore. In a corner of the cafe, a young woman played a long-necked saz, her fingers moving deftly over the strings. Her eyes were closed as she played, her expression one of deep concentration. A lantern hung directly above her, its light seemingly focused on her hands, highlighting the movement of her fingers across the strings. The melody was haunting, a minor key progression that seemed to resonate with something deep within the traveler's heart. The elderly man returned with a small ceramic bowl filled with delicate dumplings in a yogurt sauce, sprinkled with red pepper and mint. The aroma was enticing, and the traveler realized how hungry they were. The first bite was exquisite, the dumplings tender, the filling savory, and the sauce tangy and warm. As they ate, the traveler became aware of a subtle shift in the cafe's atmosphere. The conversations had quieted, and there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Even the fire in the hearth seemed to burn more steadily, its crackling reduced to a gentle murmur. The traveler glanced around, trying to discern what had changed. The elderly man was standing near the door, his posture stiff, his expression solemn. A newcomer had entered, a tall figure wrapped in a dark cloak, their features obscured by the shadow of a hood. There was something unusual about the way they stood, perfectly still amidst the movement of the cafe, like a rock in a flowing stream. The traveler felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. The wordless exchange between the elderly man and the stranger continued for a moment longer, then ended with a nod from both parties. The cafe owner turned and began making his way toward the traveler's table, his expression more serious than before. The stranger remained by the door, their face still hidden, but the traveler had the distinct impression that they were being watched. The elderly man's expression conveyed a complex mixture of emotions, concern, curiosity, and something that might have been reverence. His gaze flicked from the traveler to the cloaked figure and back again, as though drawing connections between them. He placed a hand on the traveler's shoulder, a gesture both reassuring and somehow final. The traveler's heart was beating rapidly now, a mixture of fear and inexplicable excitement coursing through them. The young woman with the saz had begun playing again, but this time her melody was different, more urgent, almost warning in its intensity. The traveler glanced at her and found her watching them, her eyes expressing what might have been concern. Outside, the lanterns seemed to glow more brightly, their light pulsing in a rhythm that matched the traveler's quickened heartbeat. The square beyond the window was now empty of people, though the traveler couldn't recall seeing anyone leave. The mist had thickened, swirling around the bases of the lanterns, obscuring the cobblestones. The cloaked figure took a step forward, then another, moving with a fluid grace that seemed almost inhuman. They stopped at the edge of the traveler's table, a presence that somehow filled the space without overwhelming it. Up close, the traveler could see that the cloak was not simply dark, but seemed to contain depths within it, like looking into a night sky filled with stars too distant to make out clearly. Slowly, deliberately, the figure raised their hands to the hood of their cloak. The traveler found themselves holding their breath, torn between the desire to see what lay beneath and the instinct to look away. The hood fell back, revealing not a face but a swirling mass of golden light, constantly shifting, forming patterns that almost resembled features before dissolving again into formlessness. A voice filled the traveler's mind, though no words were spoken aloud. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but seemed to contain elements of all these things. The voice spoke of the Lanterns of Karakoy, describing them not as mere lights to guide the way in darkness, but as markers of a path between worlds. Those who could see them as the traveler did were rare. Those who followed them were rarer still. The traveler glanced out of the window at the lanterns, which now seemed to be moving, though the breeze had stilled. They were turning, all of them, to face the same direction, away from the square, toward a narrow street that led deeper into Karaköy. The voice in their mind continued, explaining that what the traveler would find by following the lanterns depended entirely on what they were seeking. The lanterns revealed different paths to different travelers, but once begun, the journey could not be abandoned. The way forward was the only way. A chill ran through the traveler, not of fear, but of recognition. Hadn't they always felt somehow that they were meant to be somewhere else, doing something else? That the life they had been living was somehow incomplete, a prelude to something yet to come. The voice offered a choice: follow the lanterns to wherever they might lead, or remain in the ordinary world, seeing only what countless others had seen before. There was no shame in the latter choice. Most made it. The traveler looked around the cafe. The other patrons continued their silent observation, seemingly aware of the extraordinary exchange taking place. Only the elderly man and the young musician appeared truly concerned, watching from their respective positions with expressions of quiet anticipation. Outside, the lanterns continued to turn, their light now forming a distinct path, a ribbon of gold stretching away into the mist-shrouded darkness. The voice offered one final piece of information. The traveler had until the last lantern of the night was extinguished to decide. When dawn broke, the path would close until the next nightfall. The traveler nodded, feeling the weight of the choice before them. They had come to Istanbul seeking something, an adventure perhaps, or simply a break from routine. But this was beyond anything they could have imagined. The figure in the cloak turned and moved toward the door, its form seeming to absorb the light around it. Before stepping outside, it paused and looked back. One final thought entered the traveler's mind. Should they choose to follow, they should bring nothing except what they could carry in their hands and heart. Where the lanterns led, material possessions were of little use. And then the figure was gone, slipping out into the night, like a shadow merging with darkness. The door of the cafe closed with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. The traveler sat motionless, their tea growing cold, their food forgotten. Outside, the lanterns waited, their golden light a silent invitation. Through the window, beyond the illuminated path, the traveler could just make out a glimpse of something that shouldn't have been there, not the continuation of Karakoy's familiar streets, but what appeared to be a vast garden, its foliage shimmering with a light of its own, vibrant and otherworldly even through the thickening mist. As they watched, a single figure appeared at the far end of the lantern-lit path, too distant to make out clearly, yet somehow familiar. The figure raised a hand, beckoning, then turned and disappeared into the impossible garden. The travelers stood abruptly, their chairs scraping loudly against the floor. Every head in the cafe turned toward them, and all conversation ceased. The only sound was the soft crackle of the fire and the steady tick of a clock somewhere out of sight. The elderly man appeared at their side, his expression both sad and knowing. His eyes asked the question his lips did not form. Had the traveler seen it? The garden beyond the mist? The traveler nodded, unable to form words. The old man's face conveyed everything that needed to be said. The lanterns were calling. The choice was made. The traveler glanced once more through the window. The lanterns pulsed brighter now, no longer just glowing, but burning with a strange urgency, as if willing them forward. The mist outside had thickened, curling like smoke through the streets, yet the garden beyond remained impossibly clear. It shimmered with an otherworldly stillness, a place that couldn't exist in the heart of Istanbul, yet it did. And somewhere within its shadowed paths, someone was waiting. The figure who had spoken without words, who had known their name without ever having heard it. The traveler's heart pounded. They didn't know why, only that they had been summoned. They reached for their coat with steady hand. The lanterns flared once, like a breath drawn in. Then they stepped into the night. Stay tuned for the second episode of The Lanterns of Karakoy. Sweet dreams. Good night.